Pleasure to be here at Farm Writers today, and it was great that MLA got its act together and served meat. I did note that at the feedlot conference held on the Gold Coast 3 weeks ago, the main dinner sat down for some lovely grass-fed steak, which did not go over well at the feedlot conference. So I'm pleased we didn't have fish today. As I said, a great pleasure to be here. It's also good to see some people around the room I know. As Paul mentioned, I do have livestock, so I'd just like to acknowledge John Marr from Ruralco, who holds the debt around the livestock that I own. So it's great to see you here, John. Hasn't been a great couple of years, but we'll get there. Okay. So, look, what's happening at MLA? I was asked to talk about the global outlook and the global market conditions and the changes that we've undertaken at MLA. I say that so that I stay on track and actually cover those two topics. I won't do a lot around the global focus because I think it's been widely covered, but I would like to talk about the challenges at MLA and particularly the challenges that exist in the beef sector and red meat sector at the moment. So MLA is a marketing and research company. We do the development of research on farm and right across the value chain. We have 4 key focus areas: maintaining and improving market access, growing demand, improving productivity across the value chain, and supporting industry integrity and sustainability. So today I would really like to focus on what the levy has delivered in the last couple of decades, that the levy that's imposed on growers of red meat through Australia and what's been done with that levy. Then I'll show you some of the stuff that we're doing in our international markets, and then cover off some of the current issues that are around the industry at the moment, particularly the Senate inquiry into grass-fed beef levies. So hopefully most of you know that MLA's second largest stakeholder is the government, and we have a statutory funding agreement. And under that statutory funding agreement, if I run through it quickly, just on a beef side, 92 cents of the $5 levy in beef is paid. It goes through to R&D, and that 92 cents is matched by government, which creates a pool of which industry uses to do R&D projects. If the grass-fed beef levy comes in and generates that 92 cents and then is matched with government funds, it must be used on grass-fed beef industry R&D. But in my travels, and which have been extensive in the first 4 months, and I've just finished 6 days travelling right through Queensland and engaging with levy payers, one of the things that is clear to me is industry structure and around how industry actually works. So MLA is a meat and livestock organisation. We market meat in international companies, and we do R&D across the value chain, from farm gate right through to some of the international markets that we work in. My point here is that under the statutory funding agreement from government, we are not allowed to do advocacy or government lobbying. And it's the first question that comes up when I go through rural Australia. Well, why hasn't MLA defended to government the position of growers in Australia and the current dire position that certainly a lot of beef growers are experiencing at the moment? That role around government lobbying and advocacy is up to the state farming organisations and the peak industry councils, which are Cattle Council Australia and the Sheep Meat Council and the Goat Council, that represent growers at that level of government. So it's not clearly understood. The other one that is the most obvious one that I get asked is, why hasn't MLA increased farm gate prices? The prices have now been the same for the last 2 decades, and in the last 2 years they've been at near all-time lows. A lot of people are comparing particularly the beef industry to 1974, which was the last cattle crash. The lamb industry has experienced a lot better returns as global supply of lamb and mutton has tightened and the demand has grown. I'm sure I'll go through the dynamics of what's happening in the cattle industry and global demand towards the end. But at the grassroots level and travelling through Queensland, it is dire. It is an absolute extreme case of people having to slaughter a lot of female cattle having over the last 2 years taken some very ordinary prices at farm gate, and then seeing the country up there at the moment, it is in a absolutely terrible position. So what that has led to, that is in 2013, since about 1974, the largest number of cattle were slaughtered in this country, 8 million cattle. Now that, if I showed you the chart, you'll see that the numbers always sit somewhere around 6 or 7, and then we had the spike in 2013 at 8 million head, and it's going to be 8 million plus in 2014. So for a national herd that floats somewhere between 27 and 28 million head in cattle, we've slaughtered 16 million cattle in the last 2 years, and we've exported a record amount in this calendar year of over 1 million head. So the rate of which cattle is coming off is unprecedented, and this obviously is placing enormous pressure on the current systems, particularly the processing sector. The processing sector is that choke point asset that's now dealing with all these numbers coming off farm. But the fortunate thing is that there is huge global demand, and huge global demand for Australian red meat in particular. So, I'm not saying that the MLA's marketing in all these global countries has created this global demand. There are a few other factors. But for decades, MLA's been in these markets, which now equate to over 100. 15 or 20 years ago, the beef industry in particular had 2 markets, the domestic and Japan. Now it has over 100 markets. As this enormous flow of cattle has come off the Australian farm, the global markets have absorbed it and are asking for more. The issue is that obviously this has not translated back down to farm gate. So the question comes back to what are growers getting for their investment? And I do obviously try to engage with levy payers, and quite often I'll turn this question back around to them, because the one thing that I do have to do is explain industry structure and explain MLA is meat and livestock, so it operates right across the value chain. Grass-fed levy payers want to know, again, as I said, has the levy delivered? Now, I would think we'd be in a terribly dire position if MLA hadn't been in countries like Japan, where they have been now for nearly 2 decades. The unprompted consumer awareness of Australian red meat in Japan is 88%. So ask 100 people in Japan around what product they know about red meat and country of origin and those sort of questions, and the unprompted is 88%. The prompted is 98%. And we obviously have marketing funnels that then come down to the important part, well, what meat do they buy? In Japan, it's around 50% of their own local domestic product. The next biggest is Australian beef at 22%, which is nearly double what the US recognition and purchasing rate is through Japan. And Japan is an enormous market for Australian beef. It's been our #1 market. It's just been overtaken recently by the US market. So the question is, in the current situation of enormous turnoff, with the levy being spent doing generic marketing through some of these countries that we are operating in, where would the position be for the Australian red meat industry if we hadn't done this consistent marketing?